What if the most effective blueprint for modern American politics wasn't written in some Washington think tank, but actually in a dusty, blood-soaked valley like 3,000 years ago?
It's a super compelling thought. I mean, we usually think of political strategy in terms of polling data, right?
Mm.
Or algorithms or debate prep.
Right, totally.
But humans are just wired for story.
Yeah.
We constantly map these ancient myths onto our modern chaos, just to make it legible, to make sense of it.
And that mapping is exactly what we are unpacking today. So welcome to this deep dive. We're looking at a really fascinating, highly evocative video script and manifesto, and it's titled David and Goliath, Standing Against Cultural Giants.
Yeah, and it's a heavy hitter of a document.
It really is. Now, right off the bat, I want to be super clear with you listening. Because this text is a deeply charged conservative Christian manifesto, we are keeping our analytical hats firmly on today.
Exactly. Strictly analytical.
Right. We aren't here to take sides in the culture war, and we certainly aren't here to endorse the theology or the politics of the author. We are impartially reporting on the content because our mission today is to dissect the brilliant, almost gravitational pull of its rhetoric.
Yeah, we really want to look at how the author constructs this argument.
Yeah.
Because they take an ancient biblical narrative and completely repurpose it to frame these incredibly complex 21st century American cultural battles.
And what really stood out to you right away?
Well, what's truly fascinating from a rhetorical standpoint is how seamlessly the text translates physical ancient threats into modern abstract ones. It takes these ancient concepts like giants and boundaries and armor and weaponizes them as critiques of modern technology, government overreach, and secularism.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So let's just dive right into the modern Valley of Elah, because the author draws a line in the sand right away.
They absolutely do.
We all know the ancient story. Goliath of Gath was a literal physical giant. He was holding a bronze spear, demanding physical subjugation from the Israelites.
Right. Hand over your land, serve us, or die.
Exactly. But the author argues that faithful American families find themselves in a new valley today. And the giant, well, he isn't wearing bronze anymore.
No, not at all. In this new valley, the modern giants are institutional.
Yeah.
And they're digital. The author identifies them really specifically, too.
Who do they point to?
They point to the secular elite, who hold the commanding heights of the media, the high-tech conglomerates that control the flow of information, and the ideological architects pushing progressive revisionism into, classrooms and corporate boardrooms.
But the nature of the threat is fundamentally different, isn't it? I mean, if the ancient Philistines wanted physical territory and forced labor, the text seems to argue these modern giants want cognitive or spiritual subjugation.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Because the manifesto points out that these giants don't use spears. Their primary weapon is intimidation.
That is such a crucial distinction. It's psychological warfare. The text argues that these cultural giants bellow from our screens. They mock the biblical foundations of traditional marriage, and they just constantly tell people that they're, on the wrong side of history.
Right.
The goal isn't to physically conquer you. It's to make you believe that resistance is completely futile. They want to exhaust you into a silent, defeated compliance.
It almost feels like a corporate hostile takeover.
Oh, I like that analogy. How so?
Well, think about it. Instead of acquiring a company, buying up a controlling share of stock and replacing the board of directors, they are attempting a hostile takeover of a culture's moral framework. They're trying to acquire the baseline of what a society fundamentally considers to be true or good. Does that make sense?
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it.
Yeah.
Because in a corporate hostile takeover, the target company often feels entirely overwhelmed, right? Like they're completely outgunned by this massive conglomerate.
Exactly. The pressure to just fold is huge.
Right. The pressure is immense to just give in to the inevitability of the acquisition.
Yeah.
And the author of this text is validating that exact feeling for their audience.
They're saying, we see you.
Yes. The text is essentially saying, yes, you feel overwhelmed. Yes, the forces arrayed against you in media and tech seem massive and invincible. But understand, that is by design.
It's an intimidation tactic.
Precisely. That is the intimidation tactic of the giant. By naming that modern anxiety and giving it an ancient face, the text deeply validates the audience's daily experience.
So if the goal is psychological submission, what is the actual territory they're trying to conquer? Because it's obviously not physical land.
No, it's not.
The script focuses intensely on this concept of ancient biblical boundaries.
Right. And this is where the stakes of the conflict are explicitly defined for the reader. The author points to very specific boundaries,
Like what?
like the authority of the family, God's moral law, and the objective reality of truth. But notice the framing here. The author doesn't frame these things as restrictive, old-fashioned rules that just limit human freedom. Instead, they are framed as protective fortresses.
Oh, wow. So they're defensive structures.
Exactly. They are presented as the essential walls that are completely necessary for human flourishing and for maintaining a free society.
Right. They are like the seawalls keeping the hurricane from flooding the city.
That's a great way to put it, yes.
Yeah.
And the text provides a really sharp causal logic for why the giants are attacking these specific sea walls.
What's the logic?
The core argument is that the secular giants are trying to build a tyranny. But, as the script argues, you cannot build a tyranny over a people who bow only to God.
Right. Because their ultimate allegiance is elsewhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Therefore, the giants have to remove God from the equation.
Okay, let's unpack the mechanics of that. How does the author claim the giants are actually dismantling those fortresses? Because that's a bold claim.
It is. And it's presented as a very systematic process. First, you dismantle the family. The author claims that if the traditional authority of the family is eroded, it creates a vacuum.
And nature abhors a vacuum.
Exactly. And the state naturally steps in to fill that void, essentially becoming the ultimate parent.
Wow. Okay, and what's the second part of the process?
Second, you erase objective truth. The text argues that if objective biblical truth is discarded as bigotry or backwardness, then the elite are suddenly free to dictate reality.
Because there's no baseline anymore.
Right. They can decide what is real and what is false, changing the definitions of basic human nature on a total whim. The ultimate goal, the text argues, is for the secular elite to remove the sovereign God from the public square entirely.
So they can take that spot.
Yes. So they can seat themselves on his throne.
You know, whether you agree with this worldview or completely reject it, understanding this framing is the master key to explaining the intense emotional weight behind so many of our modern political debates.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, think about the furious battles happening right now over education, school boards, parental rights.
The town halls that just devolve into shouting matches?
Exactly. To an outsider, or maybe someone deeply embedded in progressive politics, it might look like just a standard policy disagreement about curriculum or inclusivity.
Right, just a debate over reading lists.
But if you view it through the lens of this manifesto, it's not just policy. It is a literal existential battle to keep the tree of liberty from being chopped down. It is a visceral fight against a state that is trying to usurp the sacred role of the parent.
When you realize that the audience views these issues as direct attacks on the protective fortresses of their entire civilization, the boiling intensity of the political temperature makes perfect sense.
He really does.
Because compromise on a tax policy is one thing, but compromise on the fortress wall while the enemy is literally standing outside, that's treason.
Which brings us directly to the strategy. If the battle lines are drawn and the stakes are literally the survival of a free society, how does the manifesto suggest its audience actually fight back?
This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, because the rhetoric here completely bucks conventional political wisdom. The author introduces the metaphor of King Saul's armor.
Right. Assuming most people know the basic beats of the David and Goliath story before David goes out to the valley, King Saul offers the shepherd boy his own royal armor.
It's the king's armor, so it should be the best, right?
You think so? But David tries it on, and he realizes it's heavy, it's untested, it completely restricts his movement, so he rejects it. He goes out just his tunic with a sling.
The way this text repurposes that specific moment is just brilliant.
It really is.
Because the author uses Saul's armor as a metaphor for political pragmatism, right?
Yes, exactly. In this text, the armor of Saul symbolizes the overwhelming pressure on Christians and conservatives to moderate their message.
To play the political game.
Right. It's the temptation to soften the gospel, or to use the manipulative tactics of the political left, or even to seek approval from the very secular institutions that despise them.
The text is incredibly blunt about this. It actively warns against trying to sound more like the culture in order to win the culture war.
Yes. There's a really striking line declaring that you cannot defeat woke ideology by apologizing to it.
Wow. It's a profound argument against assimilation.
It really is. The author is telling the audience that adopting the framework or the language of the progressive left, even just a little bit, to seem more palatable or electable to the mainstream, is a fatal error.
Because it's not your armor?
Exactly. It's just heavy, useless armor that doesn't belong to you. And wearing it guarantees the giant will crush you because you can't fight properly.
I love looking at this from a strategic communication standpoint because it is a total rejection of the standard political playbook.
Completely.
Usually in politics, you are constantly told to triangulate. You want to capture the center. You want to win over the undecided middle.
Right. You move to the middle for the general election.
Exactly. You put on the establishment's armor to look like a safe, viable candidate to the broadest number of people. But this text says, no, putting on the establishment's armor just weighs you down.
It guarantees you lose your authenticity.
It is a powerful, uncompromising argument for absolute ideological purity over strategic compromise.
And if you look at the historical frustration of the conservative base with establishment politics over the last couple of decades, that feeling that moderate candidates were just capitulating in slow motion, this metaphor lands with incredible force.
It really taps into a deep existing frustration.
It validates the instinct to stand firm rather than bend.
Yeah.
But of course, if you strip off the armor of cultural compromise, you can't walk onto the battlefield empty-handed.
Right. You need your version of the sling and the stones.
Yeah.
And the manifesto introduces the 5 smooth stones that David picked from the brook.
Yeah, and the author doesn't just list them. They meticulously construct a completely new arsenal out of them.
So how do they define these stones?
Well, first, the author describes these stones as having been shaped by the waters of time, hard, solid, and true.
That's a beautiful piece of imagery.
It is. It grounds these ideological concepts in something ancient and natural. But the brilliance is in what those 5 stones actually represent in this modern context.
What are they?
The author defines them as absolute truth, the natural family, individual liberty, unapologetic patriotism, and unshakable faith.
Wait, let's just pause and really look at that combination because there is some serious rhetorical engineering happening here.
Definitely.
You've got absolute truth and natural family, which are deeply religious theological concepts.
Right.
And then you have individual liberty and unapologetic patriotism. Hold on. Individual liberty is traditionally a secular Enlightenment idea, isn't it?
It is.
The Founding Fathers drew heavily on thinkers like John Locke for that. So how does the manifesto justify putting a secular civic concept into David's biblical theological pouch?
That is the absolute genius of the synthesis here. The author bridges that gap by explicitly defining individual liberty as the uniquely American conviction that our rights come from our Creator, not from the state.
Oh, I see.
By linking the civic right directly to the divine source, the text essentially baptizes the Enlightenment concept.
Wow. Baptizes the Enlightenment concept. That's fascinating.
Right. It argues that because your liberty comes from God, a tyrannical government taking it away isn't just a political violation, it's a spiritual offense.
And so they are resacralizing civic duties.
Exactly. And the same goes for unapologetic patriotism. It's framed as a refusal to hate the nation and a commitment to preserving the constitutional republic.
Not just because America is great, right?
Right, not just out of blind loyalty,
Right.
but because the republic is the actual fortress that protects those God-given rights.
And then the 5th stone, unshakable faith, the belief that the Lord of hosts is sovereign over human history, acts as the bedrock that holds the other 4 together. When you look at how these stones operate dynamically together, it creates an impenetrable rhetorical shield for the audience.
It really does. Because there is absolutely no separation between being a faithful Christian and being a patriotic American citizen.
Yeah.
They are completely merged into a single identity.
So you aren't just voting in a local election or speaking out at a town hall. You are literally slinging a stone at Goliath in the name of the Lord.
It elevates political participation to the level of spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the climax of the manifesto, where the author calls the audience to finally step into the valley.
The final stand. The text brings all of this analysis to a highly charged call to action. It contrasts the 2 forces one last time.
You have Goliath relying on his massive wealth, his tech monopolies, and his overwhelming cultural dominance.
All the armor of the modern age.
Exactly. Goliath represents human arrogance, basically building a house on sand. And then the author highlights the immortal words of 1 Samuel 17.45 as the ultimate declaration of defiance.
How does that verse go again?
You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty.
The text makes a really sharp point to note that David did not flinch. He did not ask for a dialogue.
Yeah.
He didn't look for a bipartisan middle ground with the giant that was trying to kill him. He ran quickly toward the battle line.
There is that rejection of compromise again. No dialogue, no middle ground.
So what's the final instruction to the reader?
The script's final directive is absolutely clear. Do not retreat into silence. Do not be intimidated by the giants of Silicon Valley or the elitists in Washington. You are called to hold the line.
It's a powerful mandate.
And the underlying promise of the text is that truth is the ultimate equalizer. Even if the giants appear completely invincible, if ordinary men and women stand their ground with courage, the giants will fall.
It's a message meticulously designed to replace modern feelings of helplessness with a profound sense of historic divine purpose. And honestly, looking at the rhetoric, it is incredibly effective at doing exactly that.
It really is. It provides a complete, unified framework for understanding the chaos of the modern world. It tells the audience exactly who the hero is, who the villain is, what the stakes are, and exactly what weapons to use.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a broader thought to mull over.
Okay.
Regardless of your personal worldview, or your politics, or your religious background, think about the enduring, almost gravitational power of these ancient narratives.
It's pretty wild to think about.
We're looking at a 3,000-year-old story about a shepherd boy and a giant in a dusty valley. And yet, right now, today, that exact same story is being actively wielded to interpret incredibly complex modern realities.
Like tech monopolies and culture wars.
Educational policy, national identity, all of it.
It really highlights how deeply these archetypes are embedded in our human psyche.
It really does. So as you navigate your own world, the media you consume, the political arguments you hear, the institutions you interact with, think about the ancient stories you grew up with. How do those narratives shape who you perceive as the giants in your own life? Who is handing you Saul's armor and telling you to compromise your core values just for the sake of pragmatism?
That's a great question.
And most importantly, what are the 5 smooth stones you are carrying in your own pouch? Because whether the battlefield is made of dirt and bronze or algorithms and ideology, we are all standing in a valley looking at something much bigger than ourselves.
A truly profound way to look at it.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the architecture of the arguments around you. Look for the ancient stories hidden in modern politics. And as always, never stop learning.